welcome, as I said, for everyone coming in. I know we'll have a few more join us as we get started, but I'm Sherry Daniels. I am the Director of Library and Archives for the SAR here at the National Headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky. And this is a celebration. So I expect some full participation. You all feel free to jump in as we talk about the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, which is today. This is not a pseudo celebration. It literally was December 16th, 1773. And we are really excited to be celebrating one of the 250th milestones that as we lead up to 2026 to celebrate the 250th birth of our country. We know that that was not just an event that started out of nowhere. We know there were a lot of events that led up to the initial push into independence. So this was one of those red letter days that we are really, really happy that they did this, actually. And so I am going to, let's see, I'm going to see who is in the, if you guys want to put into chat for me where you guys are coming from. Is anybody in here from Boston right now? Anybody on the East Coast up in that area? I see Pam is in Colorado. I know Walker is right next door to me. Cleveland, Tennessee, yes. And I'd say don't feel, I know there's a lot going on in Boston today, but we also like to educate and tell people too that there were other tea parties that happened just after or right around this time. So this was an event that definitely carried on through. Oh, so, all right, Robin. Oh, Robin, yeah. Robin, we had an event this morning. Robin was in attendance. Walker was there. Myself. We had an on-site tea that we did here at the headquarters. And actually, I can show you a little bit of what we did this morning. And I will go ahead and give you also the presentation. There was a short presentation that I did on the importance of tea in the United States and why that was such a significant act when they dumped so much tea into the harbor. And so let's see, I'm going to open up everything. Where we're seeing people coming from, like we said, Colorado, Cleveland, Tennessee, Brooklyn, New York, Montgomery, Texas, Louisiana. Yay. And we've got some little people in the room as well. So this is really exciting, you guys, from all over the place. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. All right. Can you guys see a teapot? Yes? Okay, great. So one of the things that we were going to do that we had planned to do for the event, it was, again, celebration, much like what we're doing today. We were drinking some tea. We did serve all 5 teas that were dumped into Boston Harbor, which you guys can purchase yourself. We actually bought them from the Oliver Pluff Company. So they are available out there. And but anyway, these are some 18th century teacups. I actually have some of them sitting right next to me right now. And those who were in attendance, we put everybody's name in that teapot basket, and we drew names at the end of the program. And those who were selected, the 3 lucky people, got to take their final sips of the tea out of 18th century teacups. And I think actually they really enjoyed that. These are my own personal collection. And I brought in quite a few, actually. Again, more Chinese export porcelain, mid to late 18th century. This one's one from the 1750s. This belonged to Mary Todd Lincoln's half-second great aunt. It came with this lovely note inside that talked about the McFarland family and the Todd family marrying. That's a reproduction little tea caddy that people would have back in the day. That's a porcelain trio, European porcelain, one of the books we have here in the library. That's a book a photo that I will explain here in just a moment. Another European porcelain. And then another image as well. That is from the centennial celebration of the Boston Tea Party, which was that happened obviously 100 years after 3, so 73. And that one was done by that big giant celebration was done by the suffragettes, actually. And they brought, it said, according to this newspaper account, it says they brought all of these tea wares that they had at their home from the Revolutionary period. And they had this big party and they drank the tea. And of course, they were claiming they were opposed to no representation, no taxation without representation, because as women, they felt they were under that same oppression. And so they were using that as their theme for their tea as well. So that one actually hangs in my office. I love that. Of course, they wrapped that one up a lot into temperance as well. So they were all like, tea is so much better than alcohol. Let's just drink tea. And so that was their big thing. So anyway, like I said, all of those things that I was showing you, those were actually my own personal collection. However, here at the SAR, we also have we have a new acquisition here. We have a new acquisition is the teapot that is actually it's also Chinese export porcelain, but it is an entirely different. I'll show you a close up here in just a minute. This is a display that the museum has put up in protective casing here in the library, and in fact, brand new casing that we have. If you're ever in our area, to come see here, right in the middle of the library. That is a hatchet that they acquired not too long ago, I believe. And this would have been the type of hatchet that they would have used to break open the casks of tea. It's actually smaller than the way the angle is that I have there. And then the teapot, let me show you the close-up of that. Yes, we just got this one donated by the California Ladies Auxiliary recently. And this is also Chinese export porcelain, but again, a different shape entirely. This would have been also the right period that would have been in households at the time when the Boston Tea Party had taken place. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece, by the way. The decoration on this one is absolutely stunning. I would say a teapot not in my price range. Let's put it that way. I have a lot of the lesser expensive 18th century wares, but no, this one's really exquisite, and we're really, really happy to have that one. And I'm going to stop sharing on that. And so Anne has asked, why do none of the teacups have handles? And when were handles introduced? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation because I go over some of that. Okay, so can you see the title screen for the Boston Harbor, A Teapot Tonight? Yes, all right. So that is one of the things I've heard recently is that there are some people that complain that it was not called the Boston Tea Party until many years later. And so those who claimed they were part of the Boston Tea Party usually weren't, because nobody really called it that. That was, in fact, it was a very secretive event. However, there's some phrases in the speeches that they gave that did indicate that, you know, this is, I'm not surprised we eventually called it a Boston Tea Party. I mean, this was one of the cries was, you know, make Boston Harbor a teapot tonight. That was one of those cries at the end when they've been talking this over and at the Old South Meeting House in Boston, and then they all marched out, and those who participated, they got in they put on their garb, their disguise, and they went out with their hatchets and they started breaking open those chests of tea. So again, this was a very, very sensational event, because not only there was drama with this. This was almost like a theatrical performance, although it was very well organized. In fact, I will go over how many they think was here. However, I recently was listening to a presentation, and somebody reminded us that at the time there was only about 15,000 residents of Boston, and that when several of them met at the Old South Meeting House in order to plan or to just kind of rouse everybody up. I mean, the planning had to have taken place before that night. So this was a well-organized event, but those that showed up to rally everyone together, they said about 5,000 people showed up around the old South Meeting House, which would have been, that's a huge percentage of your local inhabitants that were rallying around this event. And part of the reason why was, it was the matter of the taxation. This act did not mean that they stopped drinking tea. They still had tea. There was what you would call kind of the equivalent of like the Victory Gardens from World War II. There were some homemade American tea that they would try to put together with some various herbs and things. But there was also a lot of smuggling that was going on with the Dutch shipments that were coming in. So, and in fact, one of the reasons that they kind of got so mad was that with the British East India Company, East India Trading Company, that they had the monopoly on shipping tea in, and because they were so closely connected with the British government, that if they decided to accept the tax and purchase this tea through that channel, technically they were going to be paying less than they would from the smugglers. But it was still a matter of this taxation, and they were, matter of principle, they were not going to have it. So again, it was very, very organized, and that's all they did, was they just destroyed the tea. This little bottle that comes out of one of the museums, it's a little bit, you'll hear a few little things about a little vial of tea that may exist, and a chest also exists, but there's not a lot that did. They were under very close watch, that they were not going to smuggle any home with them. So again, today is the day. It is December 16th. And they started, again, that evening, they started their rally at the Old South Meeting House. There was a lot of orations going on, stirring the crowd up and everything. But again, 5,000 people showing up. Now, there's a lot of different accounts as far as how many people actually got dressed up as Indians and boarded the ships in order to destroy the tea. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 200. Actually, there are some studies going on now, actually, with the New England Historical and Genealogical Society and the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum. They are collaboratively trying to figure out how many actually participated. They're taking that number back. They're taking it back to about 100 to 150 that actually boarded the ships. And they're genealogically trying to determine who was there. And in fact, I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. These were the ships. This is one thing that I didn't really know until we got closer to this event, was that there were 3 ships that night in the harbor. And these were the 3 ships that they boarded. Now you can see there that there's also William in parentheses. William was a 4th ship that was laden with tea, and it was bound for Boston Harbor, although there was a small storm, a gale, that actually blew it aground at Cape Cod. And so it sat there for a while. They didn't really know what to do with that one. I do believe they confiscated the tea, put it in a warehouse. I think they eventually destroyed that. But again, there were supposed to be 4 ships, and only 3 made it into the harbor. Forgive me, I'm going to sip some tea. That is what we're here for, right? And again, the East India Trading Company, the reason why they picked December 16th as the night to march on board those ships and destroy the tea was because the ships had been sitting in the harbor for quite some time, for several weeks, and it was a matter of legalities that if the tea made it to land, then yes, it could have been sold. It was under the East India. It was under that merchant. I guess you would say that merchant line, or like how that system, it was within that system. If they couldn't get it to shore, it then reverted back to Crown property. And if it was Crown property, they decided to destroy it. Well, that was a whole nother level of treason that they really didn't want to get into. And so they knew that December 16th was the deadline. the very next day it would have reverted to Crown property, and they didn't want to destroy Crown property. This was bad enough, and so they chose December 16th as their to go ahead and get on board and do what they needed to do. And there were a lot of different folks that participated in this. So you had young, old, all different groups. We don't know of any women that participated, but again, a whole mixture of people, of men that got on those ships to do this. And as far as they were doing this, they said that there were reports that the younger boys got into boats and they were the ones that were kind of smacking these piles of tea that, as they were dumped overboard, they would kind of form these mounds that were floating in the water, and they took these oars and they were then pounding the tea underwater so that it couldn't be salvaged by anyone on the shore. And so again, it was definitely a group effort, as they say. So as far as the Boston Tea Party participants, there is a brand new lineage society out there called the Boston Tea Party Descendants. This is new. I believe they did this year. And that is one of the reasons why they are genealogically researching to see if they can narrow down who actually participated. This is a really tricky thing to do because nobody really wanted to brag that they were one, that they were on that, they were one with a hatchet destroying the property. It was still illegal. This was not a good thing. This was clandestine activity. And in fact, any of these types of events that happened, and groups like the Loyal Nine, Sons of Liberty, all of these, there were a lot of people involved, but they weren't standing up going, hey, I'm one of them. They needed to keep it a secret. It was dangerous to be a part of this system. And so to uncover and confirm that these people actually participated, that is tricky. That's a level of genealogy that I highly admire. That really is an admirable thing to do. But anyway, again, this is just a little sampling of some of the names that they've already confirmed as they've gone along. So you can get more information. In fact, from what they have said, there's a few different ways to learn about who, or should we say, who's been reported in the past to have been participants. There's a database on the New England Historical and Genealogical Society, American Ancestors. I believe there's a database on that site that lists the participants. There's also the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum. They also have a list, I believe, of participants. Whether they completely match or not, I don't know that they do. I think some of the American Ancestors stuff is a little bit older. And so again, they're working through, I want to say there's one or more other sources that have a list. So they're trying to bring all of those lists together and literally research every single one on their own in order to try to confirm whether they are. And they are doing this like a lineage society. So if you believe that you are descended from one of the people, and again, this is just a sampling, this is not their complete list. If you believe that you are, it's just like joining the SAR. They have the application that you fill out, and they've got to prove every generation back to that participant. So just like us. And again, this is brand new. I believe it's like $400 to get the application started. Although you can be like an affiliate member where you're not a descendant. I believe that is also an option of membership. If you are such a fan of the Boston Tea Party, you can absolutely join that as a kind of a supporter. I want to talk a little bit real quick about tea in general, why tea was such a big deal and why this was such an amazing event. I mean, when they chose tea, that sent ripples to Britain. So Asia, it has an Asian origin to it. China and the Yunnan province in 1500 BC is when this really gets going. It spreads to 52 countries from the origin location. It made it to the Europeans via the Middle East in the 16th century. So as the spices are coming through, so is tea. The Dutch, French, Italians, and finally Britain. So the Dutch, the French, Italians, they all started drinking tea a little bit earlier than the Britons. However, the Britons were the ones that really latched onto it more than anyone. And of course, the East India Company swooped in and basically created quite a monopoly out there. So yeah, they were a powerhouse when it came to the tea industry. So 16th and 18th centuries Europe. It was popular in Europe, but it becomes, as we said, an obsession in Britain, and it's still an obsession in Britain. And keep in mind that because it's coming over so early, this is really expensive. In the 16th and 17th century, it's really expensive. Only your high class folks are the ones that are drinking tea at all. By the 18th century, it becomes way more affordable, and the regular household can enjoy a spot of tea. And as I said, the expensive nature in early on, it ensures the upper use, and which also includes close monitoring. So they're very, very protective of the tea that they purchase. And I'll show you the ways that they actually go to protect that tea. And because you have a lot of tea coming in, you also need to have a way to drink it. And again, I'm about ready to show you why there's no handles on the teacups. And so, as I was talking about the protective nature of it, turns out because of the way that all of this tea was shipped in, you could basically go to these tea merchants and you could buy a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you could blend your own signature household blend that you served to your company. And the thing about that is, back at that time, women, or should I say women, respectable women, were not really welcome to go shopping. It was something they didn't do. They usually sent their servants to do the shopping. It was only lower class women that went into the stores. And so because the blending of this household tea was so important to these women, they at one point they got to the point where they decided they didn't think that their servants could accurately blend the household tea the way they wanted it. And so they decided they were going to go in there and oversee how the blending went so that they got the right thing that they were looking for. And so in a way, it kind of liberated women from this idea that they couldn't really go into shops. And so after that, yeah, that was the floodgates right there. Okay, so here's an early one. This is going to be more of your 1600s. And as you can see, again, teacup without the handles. Now, teacups without the handles, that is first. That's a very Asian. I mean, in fact, you still can get teacups without handles because of the tea ceremony that you will see a lot of times don't have any handles. This was the original way that they had them. In Europe and in North America, one of the reasons why this carried over so much is because it was more popular to have green tea. Green tea was steeped at a lower temperature, so it was very easy to handle this way. And I'll show you another example here in just a second. As you can see, it is so expensive to have tea, the porcelain that goes with it. Look at this picture. I mean, they are having their portraits made with all of their tea accoutrement on the table. They've got everything laid out. And, you know, even the pattern of the porcelain is very important to them. And in fact, there's a little redware, a little red clay teapot that is sitting there. That's a very early version coming over from Asia as well. So they're very, very proud of what they have sitting here. And I was telling the others, the tea party earlier, that middle bowl in the center, I really want one of those someday. That is a part of the tea service that we don't really carry on anymore. And a lot of times when they get picked up by antique stores and resold, you don't find those. Rarely is that part of the service. That was called a slop bowl. And that was so that whenever they, when they had maybe a little bit of leftover in their teacup and it had maybe some leaves in there and they didn't want to continue, so they would just pour that in there and then start over with a fresh cup. Anything that they needed to dispose of, they put into that little slop bowl. But I think a lot of times when they got sold away, people just thought they were a regular bowl. They didn't realize that it had a function for the tea service. So that there's an example of one right there. Remember I said how valuable this stuff was to them. So again, you see a lot of these tea caddies that are produced at this time well into the 18th, all the way through the 18th century, because even though everybody may be drinking tea in the 18th century, by this time, there's still what you call more expensive versions or types of tea. So there's still some class associated with what kind of tea that you're drinking. And so, yes, they will produce these types of caddies all the way through probably the early part of the 19th century, actually. And you notice there's locks on there. So they didn't want the servants dipping into the tea to get a little bit. They wanted to keep a close watch on all of that. And we actually do have one, like the one in that large one in the center. We have a tea caddy here in the SAR collections, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. It doesn't have the legs or the little elaborate. Ours is a little bit earlier. That's more of a 19th century tea caddy. Ours is earlier, but it's that same kind of shape and beautiful wood. It's a wonderful part of our collection as well. So Chinese export porcelain, obviously the very first stuff that's going to be coming in with the tea is going to be the stuff you need to drink it with. I mean, that's what they need along with the shipments of tea. They are shipping in this porcelain in order to consume what is also on the ship as well. So the thing is, Chinese export porcelain, a really, really long history. They're shipping that in bulk over to here, to Europe, everywhere, and you're going to see various styles. This drum style that you see right here to the left, that little set there. I actually have a set like that, only it's black and white instead of navy. That will run, Victoria and Albert Museum lists that somewhere in the range of 1770 all the way through around 1810. And what's significant about that is while that more than likely was not going to be the type of teapot they would have been using during the time of the Boston Tea Party, at the end of and after the war, you see a lot of this style coming in with commemorative scenes that celebrate the revolution. So there's going to be some commemorative stuff for Lafayette and Washington and all of these different things, just celebrating this new country, America. So you'll see a lot of that with those drum teapots, and they're really beautiful. They have woven handles on the back. They're really, really exquisite. The other one over here on the right, that rounded shape, that's very much like the one I just showed you in our collection that we just acquired, only that one's blue and white. And so again, that's more along the time frame of the type of teapots that they would have had during the Boston Tea Party. So again, it's all still Chinese export porcelain. They just have different styles over time, just like anything, styles that are popular. Another thing that was popular was the different types of patterns that you would see. You would see that, like the blue and white that I just showed you. Then there's Famille Rose, which is more of a pink. The Famille Verde is more of the green up in the far right corner. Then below you have Amari porcelain, which is the orange and blue. And again, all of these, you could see any of these patterns throughout this time frame. It was just very popular for the mass-produced group stuff that was shipped over from China. And then there was different kinds. There was also soft paste versus hard paste. And Europe, oh my goodness, tried to exhaust themselves trying to recreate the hard paste porcelain that the Chinese had perfected. So you would get both, obviously, one's going to be a little bit inferior quality, but cheaper. And then, obviously the hard paste is going to be the one that's going to be more durable and can withstand higher temperatures so that black tea actually starts really gaining in popularity. And that is what actually leads to us having handles on our teacups. So here is, again, now this is going to be a little bit more of your early part of the 1700s. The 18th century is the family here to the left. And as you can see, what I love about this painting is that the handleless, or the tea bowls or teacups, as you see, without handles, they are demonstrating 3 different ways to hold those bowls. And as you can see, the little girl, she's holding it by the base. The gentleman is holding it around the edges, and then the mother figure is holding it along the rim and the base. So they've got all 3 versions there for you, so you can see how they would have partaken of this with this. And as you can notice too, and actually I'll show you after I'm done with this part, I will show you the saucers are also very deep as well, way deeper than what we see in any kind of tea service nowadays. Notice once again, you've got that slot bowl in the middle. I really want one of those. Even in the silver service, they had the slot bowl in the middle as part of everything they did. Don't forget, sugar is also really, really something hard to get a hold of as well. Very expensive. Sugar. I mean, it's all coming in this whole kind of experience that they've got this consuming this whole moment here where they're consuming these really expensive things, and it's part of displaying their wealth. Notice though that because this is more the early 1700s, even though it's a little bit earlier, you see Paul Revere over here to the right. He's got a teapot in his hand that he has crafted. And, you still have very similar design elements. The finial on the top, the handle is a similar. Yes, the shape is slightly different, and you don't have the what they call the bird or the dragon spout head. You still see similarities in the design. Now, of course, Paul Revere is actually creating one. We do develop factories and artisans that are creating tea wares, both in Europe and in the United States. So it does happen. It's just, I love to see that regardless, those themes, the motifs and the design elements carry through, because that's part of tea culture. This is a little bit later on. These are going to be later, late 1700s. Well, some of them actually, that one over in the top right, I believe, is a little bit, maybe a little bit earlier. But now you see how, though, that you've got some cups here that have handles on it. Those are what they call coffee cans. So those were coffee, and they did have handles on there because it was a little bit hotter. And so it was easier to drink with that. And then with the advent black tea coming in, becoming more popular, you eventually start seeing handles on the teacups as well. And just because it's steeped at a higher temperature. One thing I love about tea is just you start to then see it. It's like it's in culture everywhere, in advertisements, in political cartoons, in paintings. This is the one on the right actually is a Mary Cassatt painting, and this is done in like the 1880s, and yet this is an elderly woman, and she clearly has posed with this tea set that is from the late 18th century, early 19th century. So it's very important to her. It is actually a beautiful set. I admire the set. It's really gorgeous, but it's something important to her. This has been passed down all these years. And then again, you see in political, you start seeing tea is just everywhere. Again, advertisement, it's everywhere. It never slows down. Tea took a hold of us, and it never let us go. It just kept going and kept going. One of the things that I because of the party that we just had here physically on site at the headquarters, at one moment, like I said, we drew names for 3 people to take a final sampling of tea out of an 18th century teacup. And that I'm fine to do because I can wash a teacup. The thing about very old teapots that I don't drink anything out of an 18th century teapot. One of the reasons is too, there can be a lot of minor little cracks in those. They're durable, but they're fragile. I mean, there's a few I have that I don't know, you probably saw on the table. There are some micro cracks you can see in them. They're still together. It's just I don't want to deal with putting the harsher temperatures in there, and where the crack could be more significant than I realized. However, one of the things is that picture on the right, that is a teapot from actually the 1940s that came in. I had ordered that personally, and it came in. The Postal Service had just totally trashed it. But I took a picture of the holes at the base of the spout, and every one of the 18th century teapots, if you ever look inside a teapot and you've got a lot of holes at the base like this, that's an older teapot, and that's the older style. And frankly, I wouldn't trust drinking out of an 18th century teapot with all of that, because I'm like, it would be super hard to clean out. And I don't know, over all the generations, you never know what's been in that teapot, to be quite honest. It's not like somebody maybe set it on a shelf after they drank tea. Kids could have put anything in it. I don't even know what's been in there. So that's a really tough thing. So I don't do that. This other picture is of myself at the Charleston tea plantation outside Charleston. This is the only tea plantation in North America, and amazing tea. It's really, really great tea. If you're ever down in the Charleston area, it is really, really an enjoyable adventure. They take you around the whole plantation and then show you the production after they harvest everything. And it's really some of the best tea I've ever had. It's fantastic. It's aligned with the Bigelow Company, but if you buy regular Bigelow tea in the stores, you don't usually get this tea, just because they can't produce enough to uphold all of the Bigelow brand tea. So Bigelow does still import their tea from Asia for the most part. But if you're down in the Charleston area and you see this brand, it might even have Bigelow on it, but if it says it's from like the Charleston tea plantation, ooh, buy it up. It's really good tea. This is one last thing that I'm going to tell you, is because now this has nothing to do with the Boston Tea Party, but it does have something to do with our founding fathers. So if any of you've ever seen the blue cornflower pattern, I love tracing the genealogy of things like this. Obviously, the Corningware, we're all very used to that one, which is not that old. And then these larger ones that you see. But have you ever seen this tiny little sprig blue cornflower pattern? If you ever do find it, snap it up. It's really special because this is the French version of this would be the Guirlande de Bourbeau from 1783. And we know exactly when it was created, which would be right at the end of the war. The reason why we know this is because it was produced heavily 1783 to 1790s, because it was produced exclusively by a French porcelain factory company for Louis XVI at Versailles. It was a favorite of Marie Antoinette. In fact, she had ordered it for her little, what we should say, she called it like her little cottage, but her little chateau, Le Petit Trianon. She ordered that whole set for that little place that she liked to spend time. But the most important part is that Jefferson was over there as the ambassador at the time. He also saw this pattern that Marie Antoinette had, and he loved it as well. And so when he came home, he did obtain a few pieces. He came home and he had this reproduced. I know he ordered some other pieces from Europe. He had that reproduced. The other companies were starting to reproduce this. It took off like wildfire. George Washington and Martha had one as well. It had the blue cornflower. She incorporated, I believe, a yellow ribbon pattern with it. So again, it took off. And so this, it's directly related to the very end of the war where Jefferson is in Paris. And I love to see that kind of influence as we go through. So again, it was very popular. It's just, it became simplified. It lost the garland. And as it was replicated, then people just took it and kind of made the flower bigger. It didn't resemble hardly anything by the time it got, generations down the road, it didn't look exactly like that. But anyway, I love that one because also when we had our tea party earlier today, I was asked what was the most popular tea versions, because remember we had 5 different teas. In fact, I can show you real quick. Actually, you can't see them all, but we ordered all 5 of the teas. These are commemorative tins that the Oliver Pluff Company is selling right now to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. And we just went ahead and bought a tin, and or I should say I bought a tin so I can keep them. I'm donating part of my tea to the events, but I bought them so that I can keep the tins. Anyway, so there was colonial bohea. Now it has more of an ohi, according to, and let me see if I can show. Well, I'll have to show you guys the book here in just a second. But according to one of the experts, it was pronounced bohea. That was one that a lot of commoners would have drank. It was very, very popular here in colonial America at the time. So that one was used by a lot of people. Singlo tea, that was a green one. Lapsang Souchong, very smoky black tea. The Hyson tea, that was ordered a lot by Jefferson and Washington. That was really super popular. And then there was another one, which was Kongu, that was coming in. It was a black tea that was a little bit more expensive as well. So all 5 of these, again, we were asked what was the most popular, and honestly, the Hyson tea was the most popular among the wealthy at the time. But again, it was green, so it depended on their preference at the time. But yes, the Boogie was the one that most colonists had access to. And so, yes. Oh, yeah. Pam and Jim have got some. They've got their own tin. Yes. Love it. Have you tried it? Do you like it?
No, it tastes like you're drinking ashes. It smells like a campfire. But
yeah.
Yeah.
That was interesting because it was supposed to be the lightly smoky of the two, between that and the lapsang souchong. It says that the lapsang is supposed to be like really heavy smoky, and I poured in the bohea tea. I had the teapot, and I poured the water in to let it steep, and immediately got that smoky just hit my nose, and I'm like, this is supposed to be the light one. Yeah, so I didn't really care for it too much. I mean, it's okay, and I also didn't try it with like any sugar or maybe a little milk. Sometimes both of those things can take the edge off of some of these. I mean, like I drink Earl Grey that way too, and there's another one, Darjeeling. I drink that one with a little milk, a little sugar, but otherwise I usually don't. Like regular black tea, I don't use with anything like that. So yeah, that's interesting. So far, the Kongu was actually my favorite. That was really the closest thing I would compare to the regular black tea that we get today. And actually, a lot of people, as they were going through the teapots, they were picking that one. I'm going, I like this one. So it was by far the favorite of everybody, was the Congo tea. So, and I hadn't really heard about that before. I think they were selling this one for this event. I hadn't heard of that one before, but I liked it. Really good. So actually, one of the things I will show you guys, like I said about the teacup, the handless teacups, and then see how deep that the saucer, be careful, that the saucer is way deeper than we have now. I had asked the question of the audience today whether you had heard of that. I have some comments I need to address. That you had heard of people pouring their tea or coffee into the saucer and sipping that. Have any of you heard of that tradition? Okay. We hear a lot of people in Kentucky, I've heard that, and we'll hear that as a habit. Like we've heard reports that like their grandparents did that. And sometimes we'll hear it out of Eastern Kentucky and everything. And lately, I'd say within the past decade, I've had historians say things like, oh, well, we've heard that, but we really can't, prove that and everything. And so this book right here, and in fact, this actually does address one of the comments, actually. Patricia has said Oliver Pluff's version is smokier than Elmwood Inn's version of bohea tea. And that's very interesting. So Elmwood Inn is actually in Kentucky, by the way. And this book, The Social History of Tea, I absolutely love this book. And there's a big section on the Boston Tea Party in here. I love this. But one of the authors, the co-authors, is Bruce Richardson, and he is the proprietor of the Elmwood Inn here in Kentucky. He is like the head tea guy at the Boston Tea Party Ships Museum. And so he's the one that selects all of their tea and everything like that. And so he's like our national tea sommelier. He's fantastic. So again, that's really interesting because Elmwood Inn has been selling their own range of teas as well. Oliver Pluff, sells historic teas, but Elmwood Inn has been doing that as well. And so it's really interesting to note that difference, that Elmwood's is a little bit milder. And yeah, maybe that's a little bit more accurate. I don't know. But yeah, like the Kongu better as well. Yes, bohea was least expensive. Ann Peabody says her husband and I are drinking Charleston Tea Plantation as we watch you. That's wonderful. Great tea, really great tea. So, we have any questions as we pause for a moment? We've already been an hour at this. Has anybody been to the Boston Tea Party Ships museum at all? Yes, Patricia's been there. Feel free to share if you'd like, whether you liked it or not. I think they have what they have the big.
It's fascinating.
Right.
I teach a class called Colonial Tea Talk and Tasting,
Mhm.
and I talk about the history of what led up to the Tea Party and all the laws that actually came before that and the Stamp Act and everything.
Right.
And then we taste all 5 of the teas. So I went this past summer and did go to the Boston Tea Party, and it really is. They've got several different ways of showing you the history. Some of it's movies, some of it you're looking at things. And it really, if you're ever in the Boston area, put it on the list of things to do. The tea plantation, I have not been to the tea plantation since Bigelow took it over. I was there probably 20 years ago when it was fairly new. And at the time, the tea mostly was green tea, and I personally didn't care for it. I thought it made a good iced tea, but it may have changed, and I need to go back since Bigelow has tried it. But unfortunately, Elmwood Inn and Oliver Pluff are the only 2 purveyors I have found so far that make all 5 of the teas that were thrown overboard. And I've bought from both for classes, but their teas are a little different. Now the Lapsang Souchong, that's a smoky, both of them. Yeah. Surprisingly, I've had a lot of students who really did like the Lapsang Souchong, which I thought, that's so smoky. I don't like it, but a lot of people did like the Lapsang Souchong. And it was probably split about whether they liked the Singlo or the Haitian on the green tea.
Yeah. We had a young, we had a young gentleman that attended the tea. I'm going to say probably in his early 20s or something. He loved the Lapsang. He just thought that's that deep, darker, smoky. He loved it.
Yeah, it's too smoky for me. But what I do like to do with Lapsang Souchong, though, is use it as a marinade for like chicken, because it'll impart that smoky flavor naturally.
Wow.
So that to me is what Lapsang Souchong is good for. Actually, one of my first favorite teas was Russian Caravan, which is kind of like somebody mixed Lapsang Souchong with some other black tea. So it's got that little smokiness, but not too much. But I was surprised when I first opened Oliver Pluff's Bowie that it had that smokiness to it, because Elmwood Inn's does not, and they actually look very different too. When you look at the leaves, and I say, when you look at Ukers, it's Boo-hee, but when you run it together, Bowie sounds a lot like Wu-yi, which is the mountain that Bowie tea comes from in China. Yeah. And so it's believed that Bowie was just kind of an English bastardization of the Chinese word for Wu-yi, because all black tea in China isn't Bowie, but if it comes from the Wu-yi mountain, that's Bowie tea.
I remember it was related to a mountain, and I couldn't remember. So thanks for
Wu-yi, W-U-Y-I.
Okay,
the Wu-yi mountain.
Awesome, that's great. Yes, everybody put the ships to museum too on their bucket list. That's awesome. Pam and Jim have their hand raised. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, so the British East India Tea Company actually recently produced gold and silver coins to commemorate the event, and they sent them out. Yeah, it's awesome. British East India Tea Company, and then inside is not only the coin itself, but then underneath there's a little packet with the history of the event and a map and everything in there.
Love it.
And tea.
Wait, do you have a link for that? I would love to get one of those.
I can probably I can send it to Sherry, and then it can get passed along probably.
Or if you can.
The little booklet is really interesting.
Oh, that's neat. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we actually gave out some of the tea as a door prize at our recent Genealogy Society Christmas party, and it was the number one. Everybody got to pick what they wanted. And the first person that won something picked this, the tea. They didn't get the coin or the box. That's mine.
Oh, that's awesome.
They got a small box. But, first thing chosen out of all the door prizes.
If you've got any link or anything, you could put it in the chat. We can also pass on to folks. But that's fascinating. I love that. I didn't get to finish one of the things. When I was talking about the, and I don't know that you guys will be able to see it, but in that, the social history of tea, there is a painting. Nope, it disappeared. There's a painting and there's a lady in the painting that she's elderly and she's, this is a whole like family scene and she's drinking it out of the saucer instead of the cup. And so I'm like that, and that was done. Well, the artist was 1785 to 1857. So one of the things that, again, we talk about Eastern Kentucky or the Appalachian Range and where people settled and how some of those earlier customs actually continued. That to me is just another, like I said, we get that report out of the mountains quite a bit. And it's one of those things that carried forward. And I love that that's a remnant from the early days of tea drinking.
The saucer had a larger area, so it cooled the tea faster so that they could drink it. Because if you pour really hot tea into the cup with no handle, it's very, very hot. But handles were invented about mid 18th century, but they weren't mass produced out of England until 1810.
Yeah.
So then we start seeing, and there were tea sets with handles prior to that, but if someone had one, it would have been imported from Bavaria or from France. It wasn't from England.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And all those latest trends. I think Italy was doing some good stuff as well. Put some handles on stuff. So yeah. Actually, this is one because you guys brought up the East India Trading Company. Let me see. I want to show you one thing. I think I promised that I was going to show this one. This one actually hangs in my office. I've had this for quite some time. I actually just found it on eBay, honestly. And do you see like a photograph of a photograph? I mean, it says British record of the Boston Tea Party. And this was 1937. It said recently discovered in the archives of a London grocery firm is this document which records the loss of 1/3 of a shipment of about $90,000 worth of tea, which was dumped overboard during the Boston Tea Party. The cargo was consigned to one Henry Lloyd of Boston. So that's 1937 caption. And so, which means in 1937, that was $90,000 worth of tea that they basically are saying went into the harbor. So I can only imagine what that would be worth today. Which that was another sticky issue really with what was going on with the tea is that, all the guys that were getting the contracts on selling that tea from East India Company, they were like, what was it? One of them was Hutchison's nephew. They were all people that were very closely aligned with the British government over here on the side. So it wasn't even there was no fair competition or even fair opportunity in order to contract to sell the tea coming over. So that wasn't fair either. There was a lot of things that made them a little ticked off to go dump the tea. So yes. Yes. And we have a comment. Traditional Chinese teacups today have lids, but no handles. Larger mugs have the handles.
Great.
Very good. Oh yes. Look at that. Lovely. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I have a lot of Chinese teacups. These are not old. And you still get them. That's how they drink their tea to this day.
Yes.
And some of them do come with the tiny saucers.
Oh, I see.
You never finished explaining why would they drink out of the saucer?
Oh, we were kind of talking about, we just had was that Patricia that mentioned that?
Yeah, it'll cool the tea faster because it's a larger area.
It would cool.
Oh, they would dump it and drink it?
Yeah.
Dump it would cool faster. Just like a larger soup bowl, your soup cools faster. Same thing with the tea. It would cool faster. And then rather than try to pour it back into the cup, they would just drink it from the saucer.
Oh,
very cool.
Now, there's another theory I was told long ago by an antique dealer that more current teacups, when you see some saucers are kind of flat and some saucers are more rounded, but they're teacups with handles, that those are called tremble cups for all the old ladies with Parkinson's whose hands would shake. And as the tea would spill from their cup, it would stay in the more rounded saucer as opposed to a flat saucer, and it wouldn't spill on them.
Oh,
I don't know. I've never done any research on that, so I don't know how true that is.
that's great.
Something dipping.
Oh, we've got another comment. We use the small saucers for dumpling dipping sauce. There's a use right there. Oh goodness. I don't know if you guys remember the one image I showed you guys where it had like you had a saucer, you had a little coffee can with the handle, and then you had the handleless teacup. They also would call those trios because let's go back to like a Jane Austen scenario. You know, you're having the assembly ball or something, but it's literally a small town. You don't have enough porcelain to go around, i.e. all matching set. Whoever's hosting it doesn't, is not that wealthy, doesn't have a porcelain collection or set that big. That sometimes they would take the little trio, the coffee, the tea, and the saucer, they would take them with them to a party. And so at the end of the night, that was one of the things they would do is they would drink out of their own teacup and everything. And that was more your mid-level classes. Of course, the high level, they had giant collections of porcelain and they didn't need to do that. But yeah, that was another thing I'd heard, which was interesting.
Sherry, where are you located?
We're in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay. Yeah, I saw about your tea party this morning, but it wasn't virtual. I would have loved to have joined in.
Yeah, that was really interesting to see people testing all the teas. I noticed I only had like little bits in my cup because I wanted because I don't want a full cup of this if I don't like it. So
I did about a 2-hour class back in August, and we tasted all 5 teas and had about 32 people in the class. And it was really interesting because then they got to take a sample home and everybody wanted something different. I really thought that like the Kongu, the black tea would be the most popular, but it wasn't. It was pretty well distributed who liked what.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Gosh. And and I think I don't want to over-represent tea either. I mean, like when the Boston Tea Party happened, I think they were saying that was like, I mean, it was a high percentage of people that consume tea regularly, but not everybody. I wanted to say it was something like, was it a third of the population, third to a half, something like that.
Well, what's funny is I grew up in New England and I was a tea drinker. I grew up as a tea drinker and I moved to the South, to the Atlanta area. And, sweet tea is what they drink in the South.
Yeah.
And, but I find that New Englanders, like if I go to someone's home, they're more apt to offer me a cup of tea than a cup of coffee. So I think New England as a whole seem to have held on to the tea drinking tradition more so than other parts of the country. But what's very interesting is if you look at manifests from the invoices for the rations for the soldiers, the colonial army, tea is on there. And pound wise, they might be getting more coffee than tea, but you get more cups of tea out of a pound of tea than you do a pound of coffee. So they was drinking more tea than coffee. And here we are, supposedly everyone thinks we're fighting this war about tea, and yet our soldiers are drinking tea. Martha Washington, she followed George Washington to the battle sites with her tea set so they could have tea. So we didn't stop drinking tea just because of the revelation.
No, that's true. And I think, yes, even the list of the supplies that was brought to Washington when he was on the battlefield was, there was
always tea.
Several different kinds of tea that they were bringing him. So absolutely. Yeah. We had other sources. We were not getting it from East India, but we were getting it. So.
Well, they say I've seen numbers anywhere from 70 to 85% of colonial America was drinking smuggled tea.
Yeah.
And the interesting fact, the most interesting fact I have come across is that Boston was not drinking smuggled tea because they did not have as easy access to smuggled tea like New York and Philadelphia. And when you look at the amounts of tea being shipped, New York and Philadelphia had just very small amounts, whereas Boston had a much larger amount.
Yeah.
They didn't have their hands on the smuggled tea. So they had been paying the Townshend Act tea tax all along. Boston was paying that tax. They've been paying that tax. And so it wasn't just about the tax. It was about when Parliament passed the Tea Act, the conversations were specifically, okay, East India, you've got this gut load of tea in your warehouse. It's full. You got to get rid of it. This is what we're going to do so you can get rid of that tea. You can export it directly. We'll cut out all these import export taxes, and your tea will be cheaper than the smuggled tea, but they'll still have to pay that Townsend Act tea. It'll still be cheaper than smuggled tea. And this will reinforce our right to tax the colonists.
Yep.
And it was that notion behind it, that word of that got to the colonists, that they'd already started saying, hey, wait a minute. So I find it very ironic that Boston had been paying the tax on tea since the Townsend Act, more so than anybody else. And yet they were the ones that said, nope, not doing it anymore.
And I wonder if they were the ones that were kind of making more of the homegrown kind of, different kinds of teas, like I said, the Victory Garden kind of things, where they had like these little recipes for, well, in fact, one of them was called Liberty Tea.
Liberty Tea.
Yeah.
Another tea too. In fact, it was Martha Washington's favorite. It's cacao tea that's made from the shells of the cacao beans that made the drinking chocolate. Because drinking chocolate was also very popular during that time period.
Now, have you tried that, the cacao tea?
I have, and I like it. Oliver Pluff sells it, and it's kind of like sort of drinking hot chocolate, but it's not got that rich thickness to it. It's more because it's thin like a tea, and I like it. It's like chocolate tea.
I bought a little tin, I think, when I was at Monticello, and I just haven't been brave enough to try it.
Try it. It's good. It's good. It was Martha's favorite. And there's a lot of letters that Washington wrote requesting, if there's any, I need 2 pounds of cacao shells, because that was her favorite tea.
Wow.
I've been studying this a long time.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And there's, like I said, there's so many really great, I think it's, like I said, this season, I don't want to necessarily, bash 2024 coming in, but, until we get to 75, there's not a ton happened on the Revolutionary Front for 1774, but it's like be reading some of the others. I mean, whoa, what you guys can like.
We have another tea party in March for Boston in 1774.
Right. There's like several tea parties that are happening as you go into 74, and it's a good season to read up on all of these different events that were happening, which I didn't know about that many. So, there's a lot to learn on this stuff.
New York, Philadelphia, I think it's Rhode Island. Charleston had 2. They had one in 1773, and they had one in 1774.
Let's see, Edenton and Wilmington.
Edenton was an interesting one. That was probably the quietest tea party ever.
They've got Philadelphia, Charleston, New York, Chestertown, the York Tea Party, which I'm not sure what that is. Annapolis, Edenton and Wilmington, and Greenwich or Greenwich. Lots of, I have not finished this book, actually. I started reading it, but I have not finished. But it sounds like this year would be a good time to take on one of those, and what was it? Wasn't there also, was it December 13th that it was a bunch of, what was it, women that burnt a pile of tea in Lexington, Massachusetts, right before the Boston Tea Party there? Somebody just came out, I
don't know. I've not heard about that.
There was some sort of little mini protest that happened in Lexington a few days before this, probably because they heard their menfolk were planning all this, right? They were getting ready to dump it in the harbor.
Well, women did get together and made agreements, because they ran the households, and they made agreements. Okay, we're not going to drink tea anymore.
Yeah. And one of the, wasn't it 300 of them or something, took out some big ad? Was it in Boston newspapers that signed that they weren't gonna, I don't remember if it was just tea. It might have been different, other taxed imported things, but there was, women were fired up too.
They were. And there's several poems, but a lady's adieu to her tea table was one of them.
Yes.
Where she basically said goodbye to tea.
Yes. I've seen that. Yeah, the goodbye to tea.
Look it up. It's a cute little poem.
I did like what you said though about that in the New England area. You're getting that that tea experience where, you guys are sitting down and having tea and that kind of thing. And you don't see that as much out here. I have to say that's true. I mean, I see a lot of tea equipage and things, tea wares that are listed in the probate records. So we still drank it out here in the Western areas, but technically we're below the Mason-Dixon here. And so, yes, we would have a lot of, sweet iced tea that developed that was a big thing, tea on the porch, but not what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah. When I moved to the Atlanta area in the 70s, you could not get a cup of hot tea. I went in a restaurant. I said, "Oh, I'd like a cup of tea." She brought me a glass of iced tea. I said, no, I meant a cup of hot tea. She takes the glass of iced tea, comes back, puts another glass in front of me, and I look at it and I touch it, and it's so hot I can't pick it up. And I'm trying to explain to her, I want a cup of hot tea in a cup. And back then, you couldn't get a cup of hot tea in the South. Now, there's been a resurgence, mostly in the last 20 years, because they changed the import laws that allowed more tea to be imported into the U.S. easily. The FDA had changed some of their requirements. And because we're getting more loose tea and more good quality tea, and with the internet and you can get it online, a lot more places you can get a cup of hot tea now. And a lot of places do, offer hot tea on their menus, whereas, 40 some years ago, it wasn't the case, not in the South.
Wow.
What I don't know is, someone did ask me the question one time is, well, why do they drink sweet tea in the South? And I've never researched that, but someone offered that because of sugarcane plantations were in the South, that sugar was more readily easy to get in the South, that might be why Southerners sweeten their tea more than the North.
I could see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Proximity. Yeah, definitely. So any other comments or something? I was trying to think. One of the things I really wanted to look into a little bit more was, how are they proving that, somebody actually participated in it? And, one of the famous ones obviously is the shoemaker in the Tea Party. I mean, he's somebody that, was interviewed kind of thing later on in life. And, I would assume too, some of the pension records coming out of that, there's going to be in the depositions, in the application for a pension. I'm sure some of them are going to report at that time that they were part of that. I'm trying to think any other ways, some, anecdotes, probably newspaper accounts and things like that. But otherwise pretty hard, especially if somebody didn't, survive into the time period when, like the Jubilee years, when they're celebrating the fact, and trying to remember and document the stuff that happened 50 years before. I can imagine it'd be probably really hard. I would say pay attention to the Boston Tea Party ships. I think tonight, I know they're doing a demonstration. I know they're doing the reenactment tonight, and I feel like I heard they were going to do live stream with that. So I think they have a YouTube channel and everything. So be looking for that as well.
Is the Boston Tea Party Museum going to live stream it? All I was able to find was that Fox Nation was going to live stream it.
There was some pop-up that came when I got to the museum thing. They were saying like, watch it live tonight, and I went to click and it was gone. And then I refreshed the site like a few times and I can't find it. Nor is there a live, like there's on YouTube, there'll be like a live kind of placeholder saying that something's coming up. So it may not be them. It may be the channel thing.
And there's a Facebook group called Emerging Revolutionary War, and they are doing some live shots, and like they did one live a little while ago, but then they stopped. So I'm expecting that if you go to their Facebook site, they may be doing more live on their Facebook page I see they seem to be doing it in spurts and not just doing a continuation.
Okay. One of the things in preparation for is that people could send in their own loose leaf tea to have dumped into the harbor tonight. Has anybody
I did.
sent their tea? Yeah, we did too. Anybody else send in your tea? Supposed to get a lovely little certificate after it goes into the harbor tonight. And so I submitted some on behalf of the library, so we'll have our own certificate. And then, oh, okay, mass webcams, they're doing a live feed. Walker's put that in there for us. Thank you. Walker in the chat has put there's a live feed going on for Massachusetts webcams.
Okay.
Boston, and they've got like their own thing for Boston Tea Party. Let's see.
And I put the site for the Emerging Revolutionary War Group because they did some, like yesterday at the State House. They did some live filming of that too, of some of the other things leading up to today.
Okay. So it's December16th.org on YouTube. Watch live. I'm going to give you guys the thing. It says, join us live as we celebrate. It looks like it's from a site called December16.org, but it's going to be on YouTube, looks like. And they do have the watch live thing. I'm going to see where it goes because I'm curious to see whose channel that is. Okay. So yeah, Boston Tea Party 250th anniversary is the channel.
It's live in 3 hours. It says at 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m.
Yes.
Yay, we get to continue this party. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go home tonight, make an extra pot, and watch all that go in because I've not been to the ship museum. I'd love to go to that. I've been to Boston. Of course, I got caught up in the Granary and Faneuil Hall and Lexington Concord and all that good stuff, and heck, the castle. I was excited going out there to see all of that. Oh, and the USS Constitution was sailing into the harbor that summer. So I was having, I was geeking out completely. And I drove past this. I wanted to go see it, but I never did get to. I went to the State House, but I didn't get to go through this. So this was on my bucket list too. But so yes. And in fact, I'm going to give you guys this one as well. This is the actual YouTube. If you go watch it that way, which is how I'll watch it at home. In fact, actually it says, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. It says at 8 p.m. Eastern time, even though it says live in 3 hours at 7. So I'm guessing maybe the coverage probably starts at 7, maybe.
Yeah, maybe the actual dumping isn't till 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because remember, it was under cover of darkness when they did it.
Yeah. Yep.
But, some people keep saying it was violent. It actually wasn't violent. They didn't hurt anyone.
No.
And any other cargo on the ship, if it was in the way, they moved it, took the tea, and then they put everything back just like they found it.
Yes. And in fact,
and touched nothing else.
Didn't they say that there was some of the tea that was stored like right in the harbor or something, that like it was in this little warehouse, and they broke open the door to take that out as part of that night, and they ended up breaking a door or something, and that they one of the guys like sent a letter back to the merchant, said, "I'm so sorry, here's some money to repair the door, like we're so sorry." But yeah, they were very, very orderly. I mean, this is an organized thing. They did not want to be accused of anything else.
It was all about, because if the tea was unloaded, they had to pay the tax. And the governor had refused to give the captain permission to leave with his cargo, because the captain couldn't do that unless he had permission to actually leave with the cargo, and the governor wouldn't do that, which the only other choice left was can't unload it. So they dumped it.
Yeah. Aha. Yes. Okay. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and share screen on this because I'm going to show you how I got there. So like I said, there was the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum, like they're, the part of that New Lineage Society. And this is, I got to BostonTeaPartyShip.com/participants. And so from the main site, there's a little pop-up out here. In fact, I'm going to close that. There's a little menu up here that kind of comes out, and there's participants in the Boston Tea Party. And I actually started scrolling down. I actually clicked on it again. Participants, I wanted to get to the list, but it's all there. You don't have to keep doing that. But here's this really big list they got going on. And each one, I think if you click on this, yes, you can get a little bio about each one of the participants. And if you notice though, some of them are not, you can't click on some of the names, which I'm guessing that means that they are still researching those folks. Obviously, some of them have larger bios than others. And yeah, no, this is interesting. I'd love to go through these and see, how see if they mention a little bit more about how they knew these people were actually a part of. I'm assuming they will give you some sort of information on the evidence that they are finding. So, okay, so Thomas Fracker, he was a ship maker. He helped build ships for the Boston Navy in Union Wharf. He died in 1825. I'm guessing he told the story. I don't know. Doesn't say. I'm just randomly clicking on people. Huh. Interesting. Yes, I would love to see evidence, like a source cited to say this is how we know this person participated. That would be really, really, really helpful. And I don't know what their plans are as far as, I mean, like with the SAR and the DAR, you can there's systems online to where you can look up patriots and you can see back like how many, like what, about 4 generations or so. You can see what line people join under to kind of see what that lineage is. I don't know what their plans are as to whether they're going to share much of that, much of the lineage with researchers or not. It's so new, so I don't think so. Yay! I like that's a pretty teacup I see you drinking out of. That's a nice one. With the handle. So how many do you think you now? Do you collect teapots and tea, just general tea wares, or?
Well, no, I have a lot of Asian things. We were military. We were stationed in Japan, so I collected a lot of things. And I just like tea. I like teacups. This one's actually a gift from someone, a host set this year. But yeah, I told Jim that for Christmas I might want one of those lockable tea chests.
Yes,
they're a good source if I want him to get me one. I used to be a docent at a plantation in Tennessee when we lived there. It was a mostly Civil War era things, but they had a sugar chest that was, and we talked about that quite extensively during our tours. But I didn't know they did the same thing for tea. So
they did.
If I wanted to get one, where would be a source?
Honestly, I just watched some of the high-end antique places, First Dibs, sometimes even eBay, they're on there. The only thing I think you have to watch is just really look at the inside, what it looks like. Sometimes people have modified stuff inside, or, and there's usually a bowl. There's usually a bowl in the middle. There's like 2 chambers and a bowl in the middle. Depends on, sometimes they've just slipped a modern glass bowl in there instead of something that might have been period. And that's hard to tell online, what they've put in there. But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's quite a few out there. They're not super hard to get a hold of. It's just, they're expensive. They're pricey.
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
Let's see how it helps.
If you let me share a screen, I've got a display of, I have replicas of pewter and China tea sets that I use when I give demonstrations and talks. This is my Facebook cover here, but you can see this here is a replica of a ceramic set. They're handleless teacups. You can see how they do have more deeper bowls. I believe the original of this, someone told me, is at the Ripon Lodge. I have not yet been able to verify that. This is a replica of a pewter tea set that's in the Williamsburg collection. This is a replica of a tea chest, small tea chest. You can see where the lock is on it. That's in the Williamsburg collection. This is a sugar cone, how the sugar would have come cone shape. And right here, you can't quite see it. Those are replica of an 18th century tea nippers that we used to cut cubes, chunks off of the sugar cube, which is where the phrase one lump or two, because as you cut it off, it just came off in lumps. And this, of course, is a replica of the No Stamp Act teapot. Interesting enough, at the time that the Stamp Act had been repealed, about the same time, the potteries in England had an overabundance of teapots. And so they were looking for a way to sell more teapots. And so they printed No Stamp Act on it. Now, my take on that is, here you are shipping this to America. Of course, people are buying it because, yes, No Stamp Act, because they'd revolted against it. And the average person is buying these teapots, and you're putting this notion of No Stamp Act, no taxation without representation throughout the common people. Interestingly enough, a few weeks ago, I did a lecture that was given by someone from Britain, and their take on this was, and because we had repealed the Stamp Act, we printed these teapots in commemoration of No Stamp Act. So the British view was, oh, look at what good we did. And our view was, yeah, No Stamp Act. We didn't like it. We didn't want it. And so I think it's just funny how the perspectives are so different for the same thing.
That's right. They were very proud that they had repealed that. Oh, see, look what we did for you. Yeah. You're right. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. And I hadn't until I heard him say that. And I thought, oh, y'all think you were doing a good thing putting this on the teapots. But in fact, part of it was to sell more teapots to the colonists because they had perfected the making of the ceramic teapot so much that they had too much teapots to sell.
Oh my gosh, that is funny. Well, and somebody I'd read, no, actually, where did I read? I can't remember if I read it now. I've read and watched so many things. I read, or I think I was watching maybe a presentation by somebody, and they said something about that the reason that the colonists picked the indigenous dress to go on, not only was it a disguise, obviously, so you couldn't always say who it was that was participating, but that it was a clear break from Britain to be like, we're Americans, and yes, you can't get any more American than the native peoples. Yes, and I was like, wow, I would never have thought of that, but yes, it makes sense.
It was, we're Americans. We're not British. We're Americans. British. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do have some actual antiques, but they are not in that display. Mm. But I do have a couple of actual antiques, one of which I got very, very cheap. So I will actually drink from that when I'm giving my talks and stuff.
I have to say, this is the first time I've ever drank from one of the 18th century that I have. It's a good day to do it. It's the 250th, so that's great. It's interesting. I collected these probably, yes, I collected these maybe, probably 6 years ago, something like that. And back then on eBay, you could get the full set for about, I don't know, $35 on eBay. And now they're expensive now. So that's what I haven't been using a lot. And I used to travel and give some tea talks to various groups, and I would take my original teapots. Now I have my original teapots here at the SAR. I brought them along. Like I said, I didn't use any of the SAR collections in the party that we had today. And but I used to travel with them. I'd go around to do some talks, and I got to the point now. I mean, they're going to live here probably because I have this beautiful office and bookshelves, and I'm just going to let them stay here. I have cats at home, and so it's probably safer for them to be here anyway. And but I'm just like, no. Now that I've seen how expensive these things are, I'm like, I don't think I'm not going to take the originals anymore. I love what you've done where you've got these reproductions, because heck, we'd all love to have the original No Stamp Act teapot, but a reproduction, I mean, it serves the purpose, it's.
Yeah. And I do a lot of education days at some of these reenactments. Mm-hmm. And so for the kids and stuff too, it's, it makes it easier for them too. Absolutely. But the reproductions aren't cheap either.
No. No. And in fact, I've got a couple of, in fact, I'm going to grab one. This is another thing that they had, instead of locking up the teawares, they would have little tea caddies, little porcelain tea caddies like this.
Oh, that's pretty.
Isn't it beautiful? And which has got the armorial, crest design on it and everything. However, this is very much a reproduction because it's got a concave bottom to it. And in fact, the real ones have just a flush bottom to them. I've got a couple of these. I picked these up for almost nothing, but I love them because they're educationally, you can actually see what they were doing. Also, the designs are not as good as you would see in the 18th century. So, but yeah, no, I do like some of the reproductions, or especially when you can't get a hold of, oh my gosh, some of these are just getting really expensive.
Well, plus two pewter, original pewter, you can't drink out of because of all the lead. But and so a lot of times for because I do living history, I try to find reproductions of pewter things that I need to use because then they're safer to use.
Oh goodness. So, well, are we partied out? This has been fun. I could talk tea all day, actually.
I could too. You and I need to get together.
Yeah, we do. Now, where are you now? Are you the one in Tennessee?
No, I'm in Peachtree City, Georgia.
Oh, you're in Georgia. Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been in Georgia?
Oh, since 72.
72.
But I go back to Boston a lot. I say y'all park the car in Harvard Yard. I do a lot of reenactments in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. We actually do have some colonial in Savannah. There's one that happens in February and in March. Camden was just in November in South Carolina. That's a reenactment of a pretty significant Revolutionary War battle. And then there's a number of things that happen around North Carolina that are some battle reenactments and such.
I believe, let's see, the SAR National Congress, I believe in 2026 is going to be in North Carolina. I think it's in Raleigh. Coming your direction, just FYI.
Well, I would give anything to be a DAR, but my grandparents immigrated from Italy and they don't allow honorary members. And I grew up in Revere, Massachusetts. I grew up as a kid going to see the USS Constitution and Bunker Hill and Paul Revere's house. And so I just love the 18th century, but I keep trying to figure out a way to be a DAR, and
so both branches came over from Italy? Your mom and your dad?
Yes. In fact, when I had my DNA done, it came back. I'm Italian. I'm Italian.
Actually, I came back 12% Italian, and I have no idea where it comes from.
You never know. Unless I can find a letter somewhere where one of my ancestors sent money to help the revolution, I can't prove my lineage.
How early did they come over?
My father's parents immigrated, and my mother's grandparents on both sides immigrated. I still have cousins in Italy. So I'm just second and third generation. In the early 1900s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's
yeah. That's interesting though that you've got such a love for this time period.
I think it's because growing up with it, and as a kid, I saw the USS Constitution before they refurbished it. And then I've since seen it since it's been refurbished, and I climbed the stairs to Bunker Hill. And when you grow up in Revere, Massachusetts, and you have off of school for evacuation day when the British were evacuated from Boston. So I guess just growing up with it, I've just always had a love for it. And so
oh my gosh,
I sew all my 18th century clothing that I wear, and I always dress up when I talk.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's fun.
That's great. You'll be very busy leading up to 2026, I would imagine.
I'm hoping to. I did a few things this year with the Colonial Tea Talk, and I'm gonna try to do some into next year since we've got another 250th coming up in March, and then some of the others coming up.
Yeah. Technically, the oldest ancestor I can come. I never married, so my Daniel's line. I can get them back 1700s in Pennsylvania. But later on, the census said that our earliest ancestor was born in Massachusetts. And I'm just like, so far, I haven't been able to. That's one of those brick walls. So I know that I've got ancestry that goes back there. I'm just like, I have no idea though. He's a tough one, but yeah, no, I had a weird when I was, I don't know, my teens and early 20s, I had this weird fascination for pre-revolutionary Boston. Oh my gosh, Boston Massacre. I mean, I'm literally the only time I've ever been to Boston, I'm like taking selfies with the Boston Massacre victims gravesite and everything. I'm just like, I am like, this is amazing. So yeah, I don't know where that came from, although now I do know I've got some ancestry there that I just haven't been able to pin down.
There's a lot of history up there too from the 17th century as well, because I also lived in Saugus, where the Saugus Ironworks is located, which is like the oldest operating ironworks in the country, and they still operate it. And when you go around and spend time around things that are so old like that, I don't know, just gives me a love for it all.
I think they speak to you, pull you
Yeah,
in.
it does.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to rest up a little bit, and then I'm going to watch the live dumping tonight. We're assuming 8, but check in at 7 on that YouTube channel just to make sure that you guys don't miss it. But I have a feeling it's actually being dumped at 8 o'clock. So anyway, thank you all for coming. This has been wonderful. And huzzah! We're celebrating that the tea went into the harbor. It's one of the steps that got us here as a free country. So yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you. This was great.